Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean go solo live? Have you ever been asked, why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Go Solo Live. This is Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel. Today, we'll hear from Victoria Cunha, and she'll be sharing some of her solo travel adventures. I can't wait for you to hear more about what she's done as a teen, into her 20s, and even past then. Stay tuned, and at the end of our show today, I'll be sharing some of the upcoming events that Transform Via Travel is excited to be a part of. Welcome, Victoria. Thank you for joining us today.
I'm pleased to be with you.
Excellent. So what we do on our Go Solo Live podcast is I let the questions flow based on what you're sharing with us. And my goal is that other women will be inspired by the travels that you've done and consider going solo for themselves. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background. And let's start way back to when you started to do your solo travel, and then we'll get to where are you now.
Terrific. Right now I consider myself a seasoned traveler. I've been doing solo travel with some caveats since my late teens, early 20s. My parents were both travelers, and I do credit my traveling habits partly to their example. I am born and raised in Chicago, which, as you know, is a pretty international city. But I know that there's a lot of fear to some extent among my peers that are women to even go somewhere new or somewhere somewhat exotic. But I'm here to tell you that it's possible and it's very enjoyable. I just got back from a trip to New York myself, which is one of my favorite destinations. I used to live there for a brief time. Getting back to when I was younger, I was able to go on family trips growing up, and mainly with parents, but also with some extended family. And we would visit other family or friends in other states. Car trips mainly. Then I graduated to starting to fly in my teens. And that, again, was a revelation because you can cover so much more ground on an airplane and even go across the oceans. So I can remember that the first trip I took on my own in a plane was very exciting, very stimulating. And that, again, was in my late 20s in connection with, or late teens in connection with the program American Field Service, AFS, which is a foreign exchange program.
Very good. So where did you go for your AFS experience?
Well, this is it. I went somewhere very exotic, but would turn out to be much more relevant as my life went on. At the time, I didn't feel, and my parents didn't feel it was the most relevant place, but it was actually Istanbul, Turkey.
Wow.
Yeah. I wanted to go somewhere that was a French-speaking country or even German, but I did end up with Istanbul, and it was a 2-month program, not a 10-month program. So it was during the summer, and I stayed with a family of 6, 2 parents, 4 children, and we basically spent the summer together. And not attending school.
Absolutely. So I know that AFS is a very well-supported program. Actually, one of our past guests, Paige Engel, does a lot of coordination through the State Department to help organizations like AFS. So I think that's fantastic. How was that journey, though? Were you on your flight with a bunch of other students?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And we were at a short orientation camp prior to meeting our families in Istanbul. And then we would be with the families for approximately 7-8 weeks, then came back together very briefly. And there were over 200 students that summer. So it was quite a large group.
That's wonderful.
Before we got back to the plane to go home.
That's absolutely wonderful. So now your parents were inspiring you to do this kind of travel from early on.
Yes.
What kind of travel did you do with your family?
Well, my dad was an immigrant from Brazil, specifically Florianopolis, and he had also lived in Rio de Janeiro before coming to the U.S. in the late 50s. My mother had started traveling in her 20s, or more extensively in her 20s once she was actually working. And she would travel with her female cousin who lived in St. Louis to places like Las Vegas, New York. I believe they also went to California. And my mother also was involved with groups that she would go skiing with in Canada and also down to the beach in Florida, since she was a physical education teacher.
Fantastic. So traveling has been in your blood, for sure.
Yes, I think so. And I do enjoy travel narratives. I do have some background with doing some travel writing for guidebooks. And I enjoy speaking about travel, but I don't get too many opportunities, so that's why I'm really happy to be on this podcast.
And that's one of the best things. It's really not hard to find guests for this podcast, because when you want to have people tell their stories about travel, everybody's like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to tell you about my trips and things like that. So that's a very good thing.
Right. For example, I was in Paris in 1999, and I had it in my mind to just be very open, and it was my second time there. So be open to things that were happening around the city. And I went to a private salon hosted by an expatriate woman who was American, and she invited other guests as well. So it was very cozy, very intimate. And I met a woman who was there from London, but she was living in Paris temporarily and also working for Time Out, the big publishing company that does a lot of tourism and guidebooks and magazines with events that are happening in cities. And she said, you know, they might be looking for a writer to do the Chicago guidebook.
No.
Why don't you contact my London office and see what's going on? Well, as it turned out, they were putting together the very first Chicago guidebook. Time Out was, and I was able to get in on it. I was actually the last writer assigned to do the last piece, which was the history of Chicago.
That's awesome.
Yes. I really enjoyed that. And I actually worked for the following, I think, 3 or 4 editions of that guidebook for Chicago, that is.
That's wonderful. Well, and actually that's even better. So Victoria and I met at an event in Chicago a month ago. And it's great because I'm actually bringing the Go Solo Live Challenge to Chicago in December. And so I may need to be checking out that guidebook as a option for our folks who are coming to participate in the event. So that's great. I'm excited to hear that I will not only have a great local resource, but I know one of the authors of that local resource.
Yay. I'd love to know more about that at some point.
Absolutely.
That you're doing. Yeah.
So tell me, some of the biggest lessons that you've learned about yourself as you've done some of this travel adventure.
It's one of those things that I've been recently experiencing more and more now in my midlife, and where I've gone to destinations that perhaps I've gone to at an earlier time in my life, but I see it differently.
Okay.
It's different. It's the same city, but it has changed and I have changed.
Tell me more.
So the outer accoutrement, or the things that stood out to me previously may not be the same ones that stand out to me now. For example, I was just in New York. As I said, I'd spent quite a bit of time there over the years, both in traveling there and living there for about 6 months in my late 20s. The neighborhood that I used to spend a whole lot of time in, which was the Upper West Side, did not appeal to me as much as some other areas did this time.
Okay.
And that was interesting to me because I really, really didn't expect that, but it happened. So
do you think the neighborhood changed, or do you think you changed, or some of both?
Both. Some of both.
Okay.
I think there has been a shift to the downtown now in New York, as well as there's been more development in the area, although I didn't get all that way down to 9/11,
Sure.
the Twin Towers. But I can remember even when I lived there doing some temp work in the Twin Towers at Merrill Lynch, and that's all different. One of the other buildings I worked in is still there, and it is at the corner of 57th and 59th and Central Park West. But
Okay.
it's now owned by a different company, and I think it's owned by Trump, actually.
Oh, wow.
Used to
Okay.
be owned by Paramount Gulf and Western, the ones that make Paramount Pictures.
Yeah, so definitely. So there's two parts of it, right? The area is developing change. When they say you can't go home again, we really do need to remember and respect that, because, gosh, it is not the same. But
And I'm not the same.
No. And that's the other part, is the fact that you've taken the time for this kind of self-evaluation to say, okay, yep, the area is not the same, but I'm not the same, and the way I look at things are not the same. I might value things differently. I might,
Correct.
all of those kinds of more self-awareness types of things. And I'm a huge fan. I almost want to say it like Trump would say it. Huge fan of New York City as well. And, I try to spend an extended period of time there every couple of years. And yet, again, the city evolves. Every place we go to evolves, and then we evolve. And it's important to recognize. It's important to recognize that evolution and actually be grateful for it. Part of us probably regrets that things aren't the same as they used to be, because it's nice in our memory to think we can always go back to that. But it's really not the case. Have you ever gone back to Turkey since you had been there?
No, I haven't. No, and I've thought about that, but I have not made it back. And that's one of the countries I've spent the most time in. The other ones are probably Brazil, because of my connection with my father's family, none of whom actually emigrated except himself.
Okay.
Although we did have visits, and we did have some temporary, friends living with us, friends of the family living with us. But, and the others are just like areas around here in Florida, also Wisconsin, Michigan. I really love the area in Wisconsin called Spring Green, Dodgeville, and Mineral Point. It's kind of like a little triangle of towns. And it's great. It's very, very relaxing over there by the Wisconsin River, believe it or not.
So when you think about other people, maybe in your current age bracket, and share with everybody how old you are.
55.
So when you think about people in that age bracket and you tell them that you go travel solo to certain places, what is their reaction?
In my age bracket, I'm still sad to say some are not. Some are not very, men and women, both. Some are not very open to it unless it's really connected to a business, trip, or B, or family. Now, I do know some people who do theme travel, like for sport, maybe for culinary.
Sure.
Eating. And then any kind of odd interest like antiquing, which is not odd. It's not odd anymore to me. It used to be odd, but now it's not. So I understand those passions, and that drives them to those areas or those destinations. But travel for travel's sake, just for reflective or for spiritual or for renewal, not always at the top of their minds. And there is some fear sometimes, and also monetary concerns.
Well, it's interesting because our last guest shared a bit about how she actually lives in Chicago as well. And she shared a bit about how she traveled for approximately 7 months, and her budget for travel was less than what it would have been to pay for rent and other things to live in Chicago. So when she was able to, release her living space, whether that was, to sublet it or things like that, all of a sudden, she had this money that, she was able to just repurpose that money. And it was very interesting from that perspective of.
I wonder if she went abroad or
she did.
She stayed in the U.S. Oh, she did. Okay.
She did go abroad. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's actually something to be aware of as well is, where you go. But, I'm in touch with a lot of people in groups who do some of this travel, and they're like, Southeast Asia, you can be there for like $30 a day. And it all depends what kind of travel that you want to do and what the lifestyle is that you want to lead when you travel. But I also would purport that it does not have to be as daunting of a financial task as many think it is.
Right.
So, and I also know there's people who specifically work with the intention of traveling. That is their real goal, is to continue to travel, is part of their life purpose and their way to not only get away, but to stay in touch with themselves.
And again, everybody can find an excuse not to, but it's the challenge to find it within ourselves if we're really drawn to some destination. What is that about? Why is that? And how can I make that happen? Whether it's alone or with any other group or friend, but just do it. Because time doesn't seem to be on our side. It's like year after year, things go by, and I want to know more, and I want to see more, and I want to experience more.
True statement. Time does not seem to be on our side, and it is up to us to make the most of that time for sure. So when you think about your upcoming travel plans, do you have a bucket list that you're following, or what inspires you to pick where you go next?
Definitely parts of Asia. I would like to go to like Singapore, Hong Kong, Macau, Japan, and possibly Thailand. And
fantastic.
Then Thailand, yeah. Even though they're having some kind of a transition of rule over there right now. The king died, I think.
With the king passing, that certainly is there's a lot going on there right now. But and therefore it's also something to kind of be culturally sensitive and aware of, what is their next step and what is their transition looking like.
Right.
Yeah.
Europe, more Prague particularly, and also Switzerland. I've traveled in all the countries around Switzerland, but never got to Switzerland.
That sounds wonderful. Well, as you look at your upcoming trips, do you have a goal of how frequently you try to go?
To different places in the U.S., maybe twice a year. But
okay.
Internationally, it's every 3 years.
Awesome. So again, it doesn't have to be like this perfectly planned thing, but in general, you have a plan and a goal.
In general.
Right.
Yes.
That's awesome. So when you think about your friends who are hesitant, I love the people who even have like a particular interest, what they're trying to pursue when they travel. So sports or food or wine or things or antiquing. Those are all great reasons to go away with a bit of a purpose, and yet you're still stretching by traveling. But for those of them who kind of think that you're the weirdo, because this is a part of your life for as long as it's been. How do you explain this passion to them?
I just say it's part of like who I am, and I was born into it, but I also know that there could have been a choice at which point I would have said no, I rather not. The idea of good preparation, the idea of reading about or researching a place, I mean, to get comfortable about that there are people that have done it and they've survived,
right?
And they've really enjoyed it. And also to bring in, and I have a friend who does this professionally for a living, genealogy. I mean, if someone's Italian and they've never been to Italy, that's a huge gap.
Well, or if they've been to Italy, but they don't really know, like, okay, Italy's a big place, Yeah. So are you actually going to where you should go to truly start to face your roots?
Right.
So that's a very good point. And let me talk about this idea of all the research. So part of it is related to safety, right? We want to make sure that what we're doing is done in a safe manner. That's a very important part. But when do you find the right balance, or how do you find the right balance between doing a good amount of research to ensure that you're prepared and, like you don't really miss anything, but also to allow the space for letting the trip evolve? How do you find that kind of balance?
I'm a writer, so I would probably err on the side of too much research. But yes, there are definitely always unexpected or unforeseen things on a trip, even on a short trip, even on a trip you've been to, a destination you've been to many, many times. So I would just say, let it flow. I mean, don't fight what you're going to. I had a travel partner once who we were in a place where they had no idea what a pina colada drink was, but she insisted on keeping, she said, maybe in her mind, she was thinking, they've got to know what this is.
How funny.
She kept trying to order it, but they didn't know what it was, and they weren't making it the way she had experienced in other places, like the Bahamas or wherever.
Sure.
But we were not in the Bahamas, so you can't get the pina colada made with the actual pineapple and the coconut.
Right? So, I love it. But that's a great example.
That's my little, shorthand for it. You can't get the pina colada in Rome or whatever.
Right? No, I love it.
Yeah.
I love the tagline. You can't get the pina colada in Rome. The challenge is that too often when people are traveling, if they're not truly open to the experience, they struggle trying to recreate what things are like at home in wherever they are.
Right.
That's the analogy. Pina colada in Rome.
Let it go.
Let it go, yes. Right? Because maybe there's a drink she likes even better wherever she is, but because she has her mind set on the pina colada, she's not going to get it.
Right.
I love it.
She was I can't remember how many times, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 times she kept trying to get it, and then she finally gave up. So.
Oh, and that's where that's actually a very good analogy for part of this process is we hold on to what we know, what we're comfortable with, what we're familiar with, and then we only can fight it so long and not get the results that we desire. So then we surrender. We take that deep breath and we're like, I am going to just give in to the fact that this isn't going to quite go how I anticipated it going. And once you surrender, then your eyes open differently. And I love going to a bartender and saying, here's the deal. I like margaritas, or I like pina coladas, or I like something that's sweet. I really don't like beer, and I don't want it to taste too much like liquor. Right? And I'm like, but make me something local. Make me something that you think I'd love. I'm willing to pay to take the risk that I'm going to discover something brand new and exciting. And now I can sound like I'm a local ordering a drink, not, broadcasting that I'm a tourist or trying to order a pina colada. Again, just an analogy, but it's really true. So, we're going to get some mileage out of that one, Victoria. That's going to...
Well said. Oh, you can have it.
But it's really great. So then, have you yourself gotten to a point when you've traveled where you felt that need to just surrender, to give in to whatever is going on, and to just, take that deep breath and breathe through a situation?
Yes. And of course, when you're ill or needing some kind of attention on a trip, that always brings up that issue of giving yourself over. You can't deny you're ill on a trip. It's just, and you have to find a way to the pharmacy or to the doctor, to a place where you can get some rest. I know I've had to do that several times. Luckily, and I'm always, put in prayers and supplications before all trips, at least since I remember the last 20-some, 30 years. I have never been seriously injured on a trip, but I have had some illnesses. And that's when I think the process has to just be take care of what's at hand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so important that we, pay attention to those details. And the more we talked earlier about doing your research, and I'm a pretty strong advocate for things like travel insurance, which is a bit more extensive and probably a bit more expensive than just trip insurance. But when you're in foreign countries, to understand what the benefits and limitations are of your own domestic healthcare coverage, how that applies, if things go wrong. On a trip to New Zealand, I wasn't feeling great on the flight over of 17 hours. And then I contracted strep. And so to understand, and it was over a weekend, so understanding how their health system works, if their antibiotics could be purchased over the counter or not, or if I had to get to a clinic. They are socialized healthcare. So how much money, how much cash I had to have to pay for my doctor visit. Transport to and from when you're not feeling great. And when you're traveling solo, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's someone that you can just call to help you out. So then it's trusting all those other people to be giving you accurate information. Or, I'll just say, having done a little bit of research on where you're going in advance and some of those health things can provide a lot of peace of mind if something were to happen to you, or certainly to someone that that you're traveling with.
I agree.
That was unexpected and certainly some very good lessons for me in that process. So as we continue on, actually, Victoria, one of the things that you mentioned is that you have, contributed to some writing guides and things like that. Is there anything you'd like to share with our audience to make sure that they're familiar with the work that you've done?
Well, right now, I believe my History Chicago is still active in the Time Out Chicago Guidebook. Been in the 7th edition now, I think.
Awesome.
And yeah. And right now I'm working on some ideas regarding auction houses that are prominent in any given city. Our own city, Chicago, has some prominent art and, antique auction houses. So, the magic number for our writers' pieces are 3 to 5. And there's at least 3 to 5 prominent houses that, I'd like to write about.
Awesome.
As well as the upcoming, thank you, as well as the upcoming, that's the annual Sculptural Objects and Functional Art Show at Navy Pier Sofa Show, which is outstanding.
That sounds wonderful. So if people wanted to connect with you and follow some of the work that they're doing, what's the best way to find you?
Probably just a Google search,
Okay.
I don't have anything out there right this minute, but I also, I know that the art field is right now going through, the fall season is huge. The Arts Club of Chicago is 100 years old this coming Saturday.
Wonderful.
They're having an event. They were on Chicago Tonight last night. But other than that, just a Google search. My name is Victoria, last name C-U-N, as a neighbor, H-A.
Wonderful. And we'll be putting that in the show notes as well, so people can connect with you and find you that way for sure. And I will also put a link to the Timeout Guide to Chicago. I found it on Barnes and Noble for $1.99. So like I said, I think we can get the listeners to review that and have that handy.
Sold around the world.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Anything else, any closing notes or any words of wisdom that you'd have for the women who are listening to our program today and who are interested in going solo or thinking about it?
Another little quick trip out of town that's really enjoyable for solo women that just be wanting to take their toe and put it in the pool is to our Great Lake that's right here, Lake Michigan. There's some great little towns along, they call it Michiana. There's Holland, Michigan, Saugatuck, South Haven, and Michigan City, Indiana. And I do recommend the trip to those if you've not seen them. They're all very charming and close by.
And I appreciate that, because one of the things that I do encourage, and one of the reasons that we're doing our Go Solo Live Challenge in Chicago in December, is because many people just want to start with some baby steps. So go do something close by. Keep it low key, low budget, find something of interest, and then just go. A day trip by yourself is still considered solo travel. So it's certainly worth exploring.
And there was a great outlet mall in Michigan City, too.
So let's go shopping as well. Why not, right?
Yeah, right.
I love it. Victoria, thank you so much for taking the time to share your adventures and stories with us today. And I am all about the fact that you cannot get a pina colada in Rome. I'm loving it.
Thank you so much.
So we've reached the end of today's episode. I hope you'd enjoy hearing Victoria and her stories, and I hope you can relate to them. The interaction doesn't have to stop there. Please reach out to me at Jennifer@transformedviatravel.com to share your thoughts and feedback. Reviews of Go Solo Live are welcomed and encouraged. Just go to wherever you found this podcast and post a review. For more information about how to take your own journey of self-discovery, go to www.transformedviatravel.com or facebook.com/transformedviatravel. You'll find more details about the Go Solo Live Chicago Challenge coming soon. I look forward to connecting with you. Until next time, remember, you're solo, not alone.